All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Dharma Digs podcast, a podcast in pursuit of purposeful living. I'm your host, Taylor Winchester, and as always, I will say I am very, very grateful that you've decided to stop by and take a little bit of time out of your day to stop by and tune into this podcast, so thank you for being here. First and foremost, going to give a shout out to my man Leo Solis for sharing his music with the world, particularly the song that you hear pretty much every episode as the intro and outro music. So thank you, Leo. Love you, man. Secondly, I want to say that hopefully you're enjoying the spring weather that we've seen of late. I know that I am myself. I've been getting in the garden. My wife and I took a little camping trip recently. Really getting outside into nature has been a wonderful thing. And I just love when spring rolls around because I get to get my hands a little dirty again. And not be cold. You know, I do some gardening in the winter. I'm not that bad about it. But anyways, I'm excited for the weather. I finally have some music on the calendar. I'm playing a solo gig coming up on April 10th at the Carolina Beer Temple in Matthews, North Carolina. And it feels good to have a public show on the books, just to get out there and play in front of some people and share my music with the world. And I'll say I haven't really done a lot lately with the music stuff because the seasons, winter, there's no gigs. You can't get out and play in front of people with the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to kind of reigniting that fire. I've been putting obviously a lot of time into this podcast. So I say all that to say if you're keeping yourself healthy, I hope that you are taking care of yourself and others, and maybe you can safely get out and experience and support some local live musicians and art in the coming weeks or coming months as well. But of course, do it safely. That's the main thing. We need to get back to whatever safe sense of new normalcy we'll have here before too long. So with all of that being said, let's head over to this conversation with Rebekah Todd. Rebekah is a songwriter, a musician, a band leader. She has a business that she runs called Shop Wildwood, which is an amazing little boutique that you can purchase some things online from her. She's a yoga instructor, and she recently rolled out her new Patreon, which is a subscription-based platform that you can support artists that you love. And Rebekah's got a few different options there of monthly subscriptions ranging, I think, from like $3 a month up to maybe $25 or $50 if you really want to go VIP on it. But I really enjoyed this conversation. We talk and touch a little bit on the concepts of meditation, yoga, all of these things that I've really been diving into over the last year and how they can really come to benefit, and how Rebekah specifically has kind of used some of those realignment activities, I guess you could say, to come through some struggles of her own with families, with family passings and things of that nature. So this was a great conversation. I really appreciated Rebekah's perspective. I think that you will too. And of course, we talk about the music and all the stuff she has going on. And we even touch on a few interesting quotes that I pulled, as I always do, that touch on patience and the importance of, intentionality within the patience that we need to have throughout our lives. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And as I always say, I appreciate you being here and listening. And I think that you'll love hearing from Rebekah. So thanks to Rebekah for joining me. And thank you for being here. Without further ado, Miss Rebekah Todd. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Miss Rebekah Todd. Thank you so much for being here.
Yay. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. How are you today? What is today? Today is Thursday. No, today is Tuesday. I can't keep up.
Today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
I'm doing well. I had a pretty chill day, but I got a lot of stuff done, and I did my yoga, which is like anytime I can do that, I feel like my day, even if I do nothing else, it's been a good day. So
yeah. And what is that, like a 60-minute practice? What's the deal?
I usually do 40-minute, yoga practice with a 10-minute shavasana. And then sometimes I'll go into a little 10-minute, 20-minute meditation after that too, if I have time. Cool.
Yeah. I have a routine now, and yoga is a part of it. It's not quite a 40-minute or 60-minute sesh, but usually the yoga part is shorter, and then, or the stretching part is physical yoga is shorter, but the meditation is longer.
Okay.
But I have to start with some stretching before the meditation. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I gave a quick introduction, but why don't you give your kind of 60-second, or it can be longer, but give your introduction to the listeners here as to what you were up to and kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Quick think on my feet. So my name's Rebekah. I have lived all over the state of North Carolina and have been doing music for a decade. I have a band called Rebekah Todd and the Odyssey that took a long hiatus, but we are getting back together, working on an album. And I currently reside out in the Smoky Mountains, about 2 hours west of Asheville.
Nice. I love the Smoky Mountains. Spend as much time, usually more so in the summer, there as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Not a bad place to be creating and writing and building a nice little space.
It's been so wonderful and so healing to be out here in nature. And like, you know, I got a little puppy. He's not a little puppy anymore, but we take our walks every morning and we have this rock that we walk to at the top of our hill. And it's like, I call it our little meditation rock because we just go up there and sit. And it's so adorable.
Nice.
Yeah.
How old's the pup?
He's 15 months now, so he's not really a puppy, but he's getting there.
Cool. Big. Yeah. And so quite not a big change, but I mean, you were coastal living before, so now mountain life. I mean, that's kind of the best of both worlds, but has there been like a major shift in your mindset or creativity from that at all? Or
I think, well, of course, when I moved to the mountains, COVID hit at the same time, which was really interesting because I moved to the mountains thinking I'm going to hit up Asheville. This is going to be awesome. And then it was like, boom. But you know what? It was okay because I moved out into nature. And during COVID, what did we all do? We all started gardens. We all slowed down. We all spent time in nature. And that I was in the perfect place for that. So I did all of those things. I got chickens. I started a garden. I got a dog. Nice. I mean, because I'm really ADHD. And I knew when COVID hit, I was like, if I don't get a lot of random things going, I'm going to lose it. So I got a lot of random things going and it was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. I was gardening before, but it's gone into like higher gear since COVID, but we haven't dove down the chicken hole yet. I don't know if that's even the right way to say that, but my grandmother particularly, unfortunately she recently passed away, but she was always the one raising the chickens, and it was always great to go there and like come home with a dozen of eggs straight from the farm, you know?
Yeah. So this is a kind of a funny story, kind of a sad story. I had the chickens. I loved them. And I'm out here in nature and they told me, you know, don't get too used to them. Don't name them because coyotes are going to get them. Hawks are going to get them. Well, one weekend I had to be traveling and I was actually traveling to Wilmington. I get a phone call from my neighbor who's a wildlife biologist. And he's like, Rebekah, there's a hawk and he's staring at your chickens. He's already killed one. He's going to kill the rest of them. I don't know what to do, but there's a lady down the street that says she can take them and house them for you. So it was just this wild thing where I'm all the way in Wilmington. A lady comes and rescues my chickens from this evil hawk. And so now I don't have chickens anymore.
Does she still have the chickens? Okay.
She does. Yeah. And they're very happy. They have like 20 sisters now. So
nice. So you still have access to some fresh eggs every now and again, though.
I do.
Yeah, that's the best then.
Yes. And that's one thing I've loved about being out here. I will say it has a different pace for sure. And the neighbors are so much more friendly here. In a different way. It's like a bartering system everywhere you go. People do favors and you say, okay, how much do you want me to pay you for that? And they say, oh, no, that's not how we do it here. Like bring me a loaf of bread later or something, you know? So everyone's always bringing everyone vegetables and fresh eggs and fresh bread. And I mean, it's just this amazing little system. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. So I know, and we'll talk a little bit about this and more about this in a little bit, but you've been baking recently. So is that what you're taking to your neighbors?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. some freshly baked goods from your baking expeditions, I guess we could say.
Also a COVID hobby,
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, so you and I kind of came to meet. I mean, I don't know that we ever met when I was in Wilmington personally, and playing music years ago, but I know it's kind of a weird way to say this. We've shared some fellow musicians. I know Todd Wade played in a band with me back in the day. I know he's played saxophone with you on some stuff.
Cool.
So,
yeah.
And then by way of me being back in Charlotte, I think the last time that you and I like chatted or communicated, you were playing at Petra's in Charlotte.
Okay.
And this was probably a couple of years ago now. And I love Petra's too. Perry, the folks that run that are great people, and really it's become a staple in Charlotte, and it's cool. I can't wait to get back to like actually getting in there for some live music. But
right, I need to hit up Perry and see how he's doing. But he is such an inspiring musician to me. We did a couple tours together, actually, like probably 8 years ago. But yeah, he's awesome. I love him.
Yeah, he's great. I saw he just got his real estate license. I think that's what has been his COVID, his ADHD COVID experience there. But I think I was telling him I actually bought one of their Petra t-shirts a few weeks ago, and we were texting back and forth, and I was like, that's a great kind of pairing as both a musician and as like a venue owner, because that's something that can obviously keep you busy when you can't be having shows, so.
Dang. Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Sorry, the internet kind of cut out midway, so I missed half of what you said, but
oh, no.
trying to pretend.
Right. Yeah, it's cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. So you shared a little bit about kind of what you're up to, which is not so music related right now, but I know you're working on some new stuff. And what I always ask my guests on this podcast, being that it's Dharma Digs, what do you define, and how do you define, and what do you find a sense of purpose within your whole musical exploration? It doesn't have to strictly be music, because I know you have Shop Wildwood or Wildwood Shop. I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, you got it. Shop Wildwood.
Yeah. So, but within your creative endeavors, what about them kind of gives you this feeling of purpose and feeling like you're really getting out of it, I guess, what you're putting into it?
Yeah. Oof. Well, with music, it's been the thing that I've done my whole life, really, from childhood. And it's hard for me to really define what it is about music that makes me feel a sense of purpose other than just everything, like when I'm not doing it, I really struggle with who am I, who am I when I'm not the musician, because that's what I've been my whole life. So actually this year has been really good for me in that way, because it has forced me to find a new answer. And I've found many answers, and I've it was like I had to meet myself all over again this year. And I think a lot of us had to do that. We had to say, okay, well, when I don't have this one thing that I've always had, who am I? And am I okay with that? And do I like myself? So it's been an interesting year. And I've definitely grown in many ways. One thing was the Shop Wildwood. So with that's a boutique that I started in June. And I knew that I needed to find a way to try and make ends meet other than music. And I also knew that a lot of my friends who are makers were also struggling to make ends meet. So I decided to start a shop that purchased goods from local vendors and also sustainable vendors, and then brought it all into one shop or boutique that was online. So that's what I started. And it's been really cool because it's kept me in contact with all of those people who are all over the state. I also thought, in all of my years of travel, I've met so many creative makers. Wouldn't it be cool if I started a collection of all those people, and then used my little platform to promote them? So that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job of it thus far. And I know,
Thanks.
Obviously, as we get back to the normalcy of getting out and spreading the joy of music, I think they'll serve each other very well in all of that also.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. But Well, I want to dig in a little bit to, you mentioned the whole question of who am I? And that's something that within my meditation practice recently, I've been diving into, because I think it's a question that maybe, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but we probably under normal circumstances don't apply enough time asking ourselves that, because I think we, as humans, our parents, and when we grow up and kind of our familial ties, you get all this drama passed down just tied to your name, and you kind of start to define yourself off of that. But then obviously the stories of what we do for a living or where we spend our time, it's kind of like you're at like a networking event or something, and somebody's like, hey, introduce yourself. And immediately you're like, I'm Taylor and I do this.
Right.
But, so do you feel that you've benefited from that? And do you feel like that maybe asking that question moving forward into future years, even when things aren't in a pandemic state, will you still kind of apply that to your meditation practice or your day-to-day life?
Definitely. So I'm going to go kind of deep here.
I like it. That's what this is for. Yeah.
I may or may not have drank some hallucinogenic tea as well this past year. And during that time, I discovered that the question of who am I was kind of given to me. The answer was given to me. And the answer that I received was that I am you, you are me, we are one, we are all, your suffering is my suffering, and I am light and we are light. And I was also told I've been in a dark place lately, and I haven't been, even before the pandemic hit, I wasn't performing much and I wasn't doing much music. And it got to a point where I was so sad that I wasn't even listening to music anymore. And it was like my light was just getting so small. And this voice kind of called to me and said, you need to let your light out. You've been hiding it. Not like, oh, poor you, the little victim, it's getting so small. It was like, hey, get off your ass.
Yeah.
And shine your light. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yes, I will do that. So I've been working on that ever since that time. That's
amazing. Sorry. Yeah, you're good. That's great. I mean, the hallucinogenic tea, I'm intrigued by that, but we won't have to dive down that hole too much. But it is, I think, I like getting deep on these topics, because this is something that 2020 really brought about for me as well, is really, I think my spiritual or exploration of meditation and all of that has been much broader than just the last year. But I think the last year has, the practice has gotten much more consistent, which in turn I've seen the benefits be much greater, and also just feeling that sense of light and kind of starting to feel comfortable, or at least authentic enough to like let it out a little and talk about it, because I think it's easy to think about that woo-woo spiritual religion stuff as either like we shouldn't talk about it, or it's like the politics and religion thing that you just don't bring up. But and I don't really think of myself too religious as much as it is spiritual, and and realizing, to your point, I mean, that we all are interconnected. This is the feeling that comes along with it, in a sense of realizing, for me also, I think about like the life and death and those questions, and being way more at peace with that whole uncertainty comes a lot from realizing and accepting that like we are all a part of this, and trying to become one with each other's suffering is something that I think is needed much more so than it probably is present in the greater sense of society this day and age, especially.
Yeah. And on like a lighter level, I think we all recognize that to some extent this year, because I've been seeing a lot more things on social media where people are saying, hey, if you're having a bad day, keep your head up. You can do this. You got this. Or like even heavier things, like if you're thinking about taking your life, don't do it. This too shall pass, and I think a lot of us have been more and more aware that we are suffering. And this year, the past year, brought a lot of suffering on for a lot of people, but it also brought a lot of light out. So it was great to see that,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the silver lining effect of it. I mean, it sucks the amount of true like loss and suffering and physical loss, and obviously a lot of people have lost a lot of loved ones. So that side of it is devastating in so many ways. But if you can have that mindset of the bigger picture, and as I say this, a beautiful cardinal just landed right outside my window.
Oh,
cardinals are you know, they say cardinals are signs of like loved ones, but yeah, it's something that I've really enjoyed diving into, and that's part of what sparked my outreach to you. I saw you share on social some meditation practices that you'd been into, and so it was kind of cool to engage with you in that conversation and you know, explore that a little bit. But so we'll segue a little bit back into your music and your current endeavors. And obviously Patreon is something that you've recently rolled out, a membership. For those that aren't listeners that aren't familiar with Patreon, it's a membership platform that you can support other creators and on a monthly kind of subscription basis. So tell everybody a little bit about what your Patreon offers are, maybe what encouraged you to move into that outside of just the obvious reasons of the pandemic. But tell us what you're up to over there.
Sure. So Patreon, like you said, is a subscription membership based thing, and it's a way for anyone, musicians, artists, to connect with their fans on a deeper level by offering different tiers of services. So I have tiers where you can simply support and get the copy of the album when it's ready, or you can bump up to a tier where you get the album and you can view every live stream that I do. Or up from there, you get access to early tickets, early podcast releases, which I'm going to be starting one soon.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm going to have questions for you. And then let's see. I started to use some of my COVID things that I'm doing and using it in my Patreon. So I've also offered yoga classes through a tier on Patreon. I've even offered baking classes virtually, which I have now done with 3 different people who are all Patreon supporters, and we've had a great time. It's so fun. So it's been really fun to connect on a much deeper level with all these people who have supported me for years.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people starting to use that, and I subscribe to a couple of folks as well on Patreon, and it is cool trying to kind of figure out what makes sense for different people. But I love the whole like getting baked with Rebekah. I love that approach. It's very cool and clever.
Thank you.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask, kind of going back to the meditation and deeper thinking, contemplative stuff. Are you, with the meditation, how much of the overlap between your existing audience, and obviously we're talking about Patreon, so maybe not your full broad range of audience, but do you see a pretty good overlap between like the folks that love your music that also want to learn about yoga and partake in that?
You know, the quick answer is no.
Okay.
I have, you know, I mean, like if you're just looking at the numbers on social media, if you add it all up, I've got somewhere between 15 and 20,000 followers, and I'm sure there's plenty of overlap there, but that's the numbers. And my yoga classes usually have 6 people. So, you know,
that's all right.
Yeah. And it's always kind of a wave of different people, but I don't care. Yoga for me has been something that's been a part of my life for about a decade, but much more heavily for the last 3 years. And it has brought me a lot of healing. I find that now that I've been doing it for a long time, my body goes into a bit of a trancey state during yoga. And it's like when it's time for Shavasana, I slip right into meditation because I've gotten so used to the routine of doing these motions. And then I go down, I lay down, and now it's time for meditation, you know? So it's healed me in a lot of ways and brought a rhythm back to my life. Yeah. And I want to share that with everybody.
That's cool. Yeah. So I recently rolled out, I mentioned obviously that I'm doing more meditation, but part of that is I'm actually becoming certified to teach meditation. And so as a part of that, I've already rolled out just like weekly Monday morning free group, like y'all just join me on Zoom for a group guided meditation.
I want to come.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. And it's a really, for me, it's somewhat of an accountability for myself to hold true to this, like becoming better at sharing the knowledge that I'm seeking and learning from, but also because I think people can use it, and it's hard. I've talked to so many people that are like, I can't meditate. And I'm like, yeah, you can. You just don't, it's not as hard as you're making it out to be, and so how much of are any of your yoga courses or classes that you have? Oh, before I go there, I was going to say, and so my weekly, like I've had some weeks where nobody shows up, but I'm still sitting there on Zoom and like teaching my class and like record it so that I can go back and like think about how I'm presenting these things. So I feel your pain when it's like nobody's there. It's like, this is just as more so probably for me than it is for all those other people. But but are you doing any, I know you're yourself are partaking in meditation, but are you guiding any of your yogis on any meditation journeys at the end of the class, or?
Yeah. So I teach a beginner yoga class. So everyone's beginner to pretty much all of it, yoga and meditation. And they say the same thing. Oh, I can't meditate. So recently I've actually been incorporating Shavasana more into a guided meditation rather than just letting people lay there for 8 minutes and like hoping they get somewhere, So I have a little singing bowl, and it's actually a big one, and it's crystal quartz, and I love it so much. But I asked them to find an intention, and we begin there. And then, I let them drift for a minute, and then I begin to play the singing bowl. And I've told them every time I play the singing bowl, we're going to try and just come back to that center place, wherever you decide for that to be. Yeah. And I feel like that's a good beginner way to do that. And I need that all the time. Someone to say like, come on back. And then you're like, oh, I was thinking about my grocery list, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the point I always make to people, is like, you're never going to stop the thoughts. Like that is a vicious cycle that is part of the consciousness that we have, just as much as we're fortunate for the consciousness. Like, you're going to have thoughts, so you can't just ultimately stop them at any given time, but you can hone a practice to try and bring yourself back to whatever that is. And I found that that mantra-based meditations are really good for me, because it's that subtle intention, or that subtle repetitive mantra that doesn't necessarily have it doesn't have to have like a definitive meaning behind it, but it's something that always brings you back to the here and the now, and that kind of presence or awareness. So it's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm loving it. And there's a couple of folks that kind of show up regularly, and they seem to enjoy it. And if it's only one person that kind of gets deeper into meditation because of my exploration and sharing, I'm totally cool with that too,
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I started doing a thing recently. It's over now, but it was a 5-week course on open heart for everyone. Have you heard of that meditation practice? I
don't know if I've heard of that specific one. I know I've seen I've been really big into Ram Dass and then also some Buddhist kind of stuff. And there's a lot of, you've probably heard of, or you've probably been served the ads for Sounds True, the organization out of Colorado.
I haven't.
Okay. I saw something recently that was on like a course for heart opening practice, basically. So it's probably not the exact one you're talking of, but
could be
something similar.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was like you touch your heart, you smile to your heart, you bring your heart smile out to everyone else. And then it got into deeper stuff where it was like a mantra being spoken, talking about cleaning out your heart and then replacing it with light, replacing that space with light. So a lot of different focuses like that. Yeah,
that's great. I was just thinking, I think it's Pema Chodron's got a course on heart opening course through Sounds True. But I mean, those are great practices. And that's one thing that I've really learned through reading more on Ram Dass's stuff. I just read his memoir, and his big thing was it's like loving awareness was like his mantra for the last however many years. And we definitely need more love in this world, and sharing it, not in the sense that we typically think of as Westerners, of like that physical attraction love, but just the compassion and heart opening love that you're talking about. So
right. Yeah. And just speaking on like everyone's suffering, we all, and I'm speaking to myself, need to focus on, do I have enough? Do I have more than I need? And does someone else have less than they need? And, just trying to bridge the gap. Yeah.
So, I mean, you said it's very simply there, and it should be more simple than I think it is in our political, socioeconomic climate, unfortunately. But yeah, well, before we I mean, this is all good stuff that usually doesn't start happening until segment 2. So we're right on the same page here. But before we go there, circling back real quick to like the Dharma or the purpose within your music, are there any cool stories or unique stories that you have maybe from past like interactions with fans that really like drive home to you that feeling of, this is why I do what I do, outside of obviously your love and passion for music, but really more so of that kind of, I know as a performer, as a songwriter, and somebody that puts stuff out there, sometimes it is, as much as we shouldn't look externally for the gratification, but to feel like we're making an impact through or that our art is making an impact is something I think that really the reason a lot of people do art and continue to pursue it. So do you have any kind of unique moments that stand out in your mind around that?
Yeah, and you nailed it. I mean, I think that being an artist, the point and the purpose of it is to basically take what life gives you and chew on it and digest it, and then put it out there for others to kind of see a digestible version in the form of art. So, because a lot of us have a hard time digesting thoughts on life and different experiences, but when you see art or you hear a song, suddenly it's said so eloquently that it makes sense. So that's what I strive to do. Whether or not it's successful is debatable, but I did have an experience once that comes to mind where my band and I were playing in Wilmington at the Brooklyn Arts Center, and it was a great gig and there were a lot of people there, and I was like, oh, we killed it. And I walk off the stage and this woman is standing kind of at like the barricade there, and she was crying. And she was like, hey, like, come here. So I walk over and her head was shaved, and she said, I just so appreciate you being so open online, on social media, with your struggles as well as in your music. And she said that one of my songs had helped her a lot, but she was going through cancer and she had lost someone. And I think just seeing another human being open about their experience, which is what art is supposed to be, that alone had helped her see that she wasn't the only one. And it's crazy to me that, I don't know, like, of course she's not the only one, but sometimes and I've been there recently, we get in our heads and we think, I'm completely alone in this and no one understands. Yeah. No one cares. No one else has ever been through what I'm going through. But then some artist who had to probably dig really deep into their pain in order to put that out, some artists did that. And because they did that, they helped someone. So yeah, that's
a beautiful story, and that vulnerability sometimes of sharing the things that are internal to us and are very sometimes hard to open up to share with others, especially on social media platform, because it's not like a one-on-one conversation with you and me as a friend or something saying, hey, I'm sharing this because I need some help or guidance, but it's really just being open to allowing the realization that, to your point, I mean, it's as much as it feels like it's probably unique to you, we're never going to be the first ones going through certain situations, or really probably any situation at this point in time in the universe. But that's a very beautiful story. And I think there's a couple of times where over the last 6 months or so, I've started sharing more about my practice and spirituality, and it's weird to share those things because you're like, who the hell cares? Nobody wants to hear that from you. But then there's that one person that you don't even necessarily interact with on like a frequent basis that comments is like, I really needed to hear that today. And it's like, well, I'm so glad that I said it then, or I'm so glad that I shared it, if nothing else, just so that you got whatever you got out of it,
Absolutely.
Well, let's use that as an opportunity to segue. You mentioned obviously you've kind of been struggling on certain things, and I know you had your mom passed away a couple of years ago, recently, I guess you could say, and life throws us these challenges, and as we try to evolve and manage them, it can take a toll on us, but we can also grow and learn from it. So, I pulled in segment 2. We always talk about different lyrics or different pieces of language that really encourage diving deeper internally, but also thinking more contemplatively over things and how they impact us, or maybe how we could apply them. So the first thing that I wanted to ask about was your tune, Wandering Soul. I don't know that it's relative. I think that song came out well before maybe the challenges with losing a family member, but it made me think about that because I recently lost a family member, and really looking at each other and the connectedness on a soul level. I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing a little bit about the background of that song, or what kind of inspired you on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for listening to it. Wandering Soul was written in 2010, actually after my father passed. And then I think it came out first in 2011 on a little EP that I still have up on, I think it's still on Spotify. I'm pretty sure
it is. Yeah.
Okay.
I listened to both versions, which I liked. I was like, I wonder what the difference is in these two. But
and you're like, that's a big difference.
Not drastically. I mean, you could tell that the second one, I think, you obviously you had grown, I think, as an artist, and from a presentation or performance level, I felt more confidence, if that
for
is
sure.
anything, but.
And so Wandering Soul, I mean, like every song is about a boy. So Wandering Soul is about a boy that broke my heart, of course, but also it's about who I was becoming, because the loss of my father was very great to me, and he was my music person, in my life. So when I lost him on a physical level, at the time at least, I thought I had just lost everything, and I really began to wander. I mean, I was booking gigs all around the United States, and I was hopping in a car and driving around, sleeping on floors with people I didn't know. It was kind of dangerous, honestly, and I'm very lucky that I made it out of that. But it was kind of like, the chorus was, be easy on yourself during this time. And I think, it's related to the boy. I think I was saying, like, I don't know what I was saying. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, take your time and be easy on yourself.
Well, and that's what it's easy, I think, if you're trying to pick apart songs, it's very easy always to assume that it's about a significant other, or that, because so many songs are, right? But
yeah.
I didn't, so I think it's safe to assume that, but at the same time, it can be interpreted based on how you as a listener can kind of take it, or what you're going through at the time. And
yeah,
I was thinking about how the taking your time and the repetitiveness of that was just, especially tying to the word soul, to me was very timely, in the sense of remembering that everything kind of all of this stuff is unfolding, as Ram Dass says, in perfectly, it's all perfectly, it's happening how it's supposed to. And as hard as that can be sometimes to, buy into, I guess it's also something that if you release the tension and just allow the time to kind of work through whatever it is, you're more than likely going to find yourself on the other side of those struggles, and
yeah.
But I enjoyed the song, but also just kind
Thanks.
of hearing that lyric for whatever reason spoke to me in that way. But and then that led me into kind of researching some quotes to maybe share with you, to then get your thoughts on, and your feedback on. So the first one that I pulled is a Leo Tolstoy quote. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. That sounds off, but
I think you're right.
Okay. Either way, the quote is, patience is waiting, not passively waiting. That is laziness, but to keep going when the going is hard and slow. That is patience. The two most powerful warriors are patience and time. So when you hear that, what do you think? What does that bring about within you?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, where do I even begin? A thing that I've said sort of as a joke, it became a joke, but it started off very seriously. A friend of mine and I, we would always say like, this thing's bothering me, but I'm going through all this, but it's going to be okay. And then we would say, yeah, patience and nature. That's the theme for this year, patience and nature. And coming from, so to back up a little bit, in 2016, 17, my band was doing a lot and we were playing a lot of gigs. I think I played 225 gigs in 2017, which when you're driving to different cities, that's crazy. You know, that's a lot. And we were putting out an album and we had a Kickstarter and we raised all these funds and like played all these festivals and it was great. And then coming from that, my mother was diagnosed with an illness and 7 months later she had passed. And during that 7 months, I sold all of my stuff and moved into her home to care for her. And then suddenly I found myself being the executrix of an estate. So I went from like the girl on stage drinking whiskey with a nose ring to like an executrix of an estate and talking to all these very different people than I was used to talking to.
And making decisions, I assume, that you aren't used to or have ever made before.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of pressure, of course, to do everything perfectly and to the T. And it was hard. But anyway, I got through that and then moved out here. And then it was like, okay, what do I do now? Who am I now? Back to the who am I? The music had stopped. The band had dissipated. I had not played many gigs because of my responsibilities to care for my mother and then to care for her estate. Everything I had ever known had just gone away, you know? And then I found myself on a quiet mountain and it was like, caca,
Yeah.
you know? So, and then COVID hit and I was like, well, shit, what am I doing? So I just got back into what I had begun, which was I got my yoga certification in 2018, right before my mom was diagnosed. Perfect timing, just as you said, because this one thing that I didn't really think would be a huge part of my life became the thing that I did every single day. And it was the thing that kept me grounded. And I also noticed this year that I was forced to pause. I was forced to watch nature in its rhythm and notice how out of sync I was with that rhythm. You know, I got a puppy and I got baby chicks, and you can't rush a puppy and you can't rush baby chicks. And when you plant that garden, you cannot rush those seeds. You're like, okay, nature, here I am. I'm going to sit here.
I was doing that yesterday, actually, out there looking, waiting. I saw a couple little seeds, little seedlings popping up in the dirt. And I'm like, yes. Now what do? I wait, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what it makes me think of, is getting in sync with the natural rhythm of nature.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a lot in line too. And the phrase like not passively waiting, that is laziness. And I think that especially under 2020 times and like COVID, it's very easy to kind of fall into the traps of, you know, drinking the sorrows away or whatever. You know, so many things that aren't really serving to kind of put you in your best place when to come out of all of this, you know. But also, so yeah, that whole like that is laziness component is like, well, you need to still be productive in a sense, but it's finding the way to do it with intention and with the flow of everything else.
Absolutely.
So I love that.
I like to think of it as and that I think in a creative sense we all go through this phase where it's like you're forced to be patient because things aren't happening yet. I think of it as a boiling pot of water, and those first 4 minutes where you're just like, nothing's happening, you know? Yeah. But then all of a sudden, so I think a lot of us have been in that place for a year. It's been a lot of putting things in place, getting things ready, and then just having to wait.
Yeah. And having faith in like your intentionality of it, and that the universe, you put it out into the universe. And as long as you're doing it with the right intentions, the universe I found is pretty good about finding a way to work with you, you know?
So good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the next quote that I have is actually from this book. Well, you can't really see it. Is it going to get into focus?
Nice.
I can't tell because of there's the words. Yeah. And I'm going to butcher trying to pronounce his name, but it's just a stick not han. I'll just do it real quick like that, But the quote I was reading through, and I keep this around just to kind of read randomly, but I was kind of thinking, because I'd done some research on your music and trying to really get prepared for this conversation. And so this one stuck out to me when I was thinking about everything else that I pulled for this. So this quote is, I don't remember which chapter it's from, but anyways, he says, when we embrace our strong emotions with mindfulness and concentration, we'll be able to see the roots of these mental formations. We'll know where our suffering has come from. And when we see the roots of things, our suffering will lessen. So mindfulness recognizes, embraces, and relieves. So there's kind of a lot there, but it's also, that's the great thing about his stuff, is that it's like so straightforward, but at the same time, if you start to unpack it and really like stop and reread sentences, it's like it can get deep,
Yeah, for sure.
But what are your thoughts on that? Kind of like how mindfulness can help you recognize, embrace, and then relieve all that suffering that we've talked about throughout this episode.
Yeah. Well, if I'm going to be vulnerable, which I'm trying to be, I am going through a divorce, which I've sort of made known, in as nice a way as I can. And I find that quote to relate strongly with what I'm dealing with. I've been in therapy off and on throughout really the last decade, to deal with the suffering of the loss of my father, and then the suffering of the loss of my mother, and now the loss of, a partner. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the first thing we have to do is truly see what is in front of us and rid ourselves of any denial, aka any ego, to really see like what happened here and what went wrong, and how could I have done that differently? Not to say like, oh, I wish I could change that and have it back, but just moving forward, how can I see a little more clearly? And I went to school for fine art, and it's similar in the drawing. When you're doing like figure drawing, you're training your eye to tell your hand exactly what you see, not what you want to see. And there's things like, if I hold my hand like this, it's foreshortened, so the hand is only actually an inch tall, this way. But your mind sees it as that, so you have to train your eye to draw it like that. So same with this quote, it's like, in order to see, you need to get to the root of the suffering. And in order to get to the root of the suffering, you have to be willing to see the things you don't necessarily want to see, because they're not fun all the time.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like being the witness, the observer, separating yourself, separating you as an observer from those thoughts or those feelings and those things that you're used to naturally just going to. Which is way easier said than done.
Right.
Way easier said than done.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable. And,
Thanks.
I know that that's not always easy. And obviously, going through something like that, I applaud you for being vulnerable, but also being, becoming aware and truly kind of trying to tap into that, because I think it's safe to say that a lot of people go through it with just maintaining a sense of frustration and not really opening up to those things. So,
right. I think, I mean, just to speak to that quickly, I think that for anyone watching who is going through that or has gone through that, I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, something went terribly wrong here. I have to figure that out. But also, in order for me to move forward, I must walk through this. I must see all of it clearly, and I must forgive myself as well as the other person involved, because that's the only way to move forward. Otherwise, like you said, we just carry on with frustration and anger, and it builds and builds and builds. And it's the same with the body and yoga. The tension, the body keeps the tension. You got to let it go. And the only way to let it go is to see it clearly.
Yeah. Truly become aware of it. Yeah, that's the thing I love the most about the yoga practice, and not speaking specifically of the physical nature of it, but the kind of ancient wisdom, India yoga, the Vedic approach is, the true mind, body, spirit, and the culmination of all of it together. It's really important. And, it's tough. And in situations, it's tough to kind of keep that awareness, because it's so easy to slip into the ego of everything, because I'm right, I know what
Right.
I know what's right for me and what's right for this. But and I would say, it's, while my approach to life in general is shifting as I feel like I'm learning and opening up, I think it's safe to say that, not to say that you mentioned of all the things you did wrong. It's not to, if you can try to shift your mind to not look at it as all wrong, but as like right for this time. Unfortunately, as sad as some of the situations and frustrating as they can be, but it's, as they talk about, if you believe in kind of these reincarnation or the past lives and all of that, it's really like working out of of what your karma is through life. And so how do you learn from these things and walk through them with that awareness as a witness of what's going on, to truly grow spiritually and hopefully mindfully as well. And that's I don't know, that's a tough thing to figure out, but you have to
That's
be
good.
open to it too, so
Yeah, that's
well, cool.
good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you have anything else you want to unpack on that, I'm
No,
welcome
I'm
to.
good.
But yeah, all right, cool. Well, we're pushing up on getting close to an hour, so I'll segue into segment 3. I always ask my guests, within the window of what you have done, and obviously you've met a lot of people with makers and different projects, but are there any kind of key issues or key organizations? Maybe it doesn't have to be nonprofit or like socially minded, social justice or anything like that, but are there any organizations that you want to shout out that maybe have been doing something good within the community, or really just a business you want to spotlight that falls in line with something that you believe in and you love and want to share, that maybe doesn't get all the love that they should?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I can't. Of course, I can't think of any of the names now that you've asked me.
Well, there was one that you recently partnered with in Wilmington, right? A nonprofit.
I was gonna say that Randy Evans is a guy who works with people who are unsheltered, and I've worked with him in the past. I think he does an amazing job. He is a feet on the ground kind of guy, and yeah, I would definitely say when I was working with him, it was called Walking Tall Wilmington.
Okay.
I think it might still be called that, but yeah, he works with the unsheltered community. And I mean, he goes above and beyond. He has personal relationships with all of these people, and he really could always use some support. So shout out to him.
Yeah.
Check them out. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. I'll do some research and make sure to plug them in all the show notes, so that if anybody wants to go support, they can.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, where's the best place? Obviously Patreon, but is the best place for folks to go to your website, social media, share some handles so that people know where to go follow you and find you if they're just listening and for whatever reason aren't familiar with you?
Yeah. So my website is just RebekahTodd.com. Instagram is Rebekah Todd. I spell my name with a K, K-A-H. They can, of course, support the boutique, which not only supports me, but supports local makers. The Patreon supports me as well as my band that is going to be getting together really soon. And Facebook and all that good stuff. But to quickly announce some exciting things, I haven't announced this yet, so you'll be the first one.
Although you might announce it between now and when this goes live, but that's okay.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
This will be the first recorded announcement.
All right, good.
So I'm moving soon. With all the change that I just talked to you about, I've decided that while it has been a wonderful and healing place, I think that this area has served its purpose for me, and I think it's time for me to get back out there and start performing. So I'm going to be moving back to Wilmington for a time. Okay. Not sure how long, but I have a lot of gigs booked already, and I'm going to be putting that up on the website soon. We are playing at Floyd Fest this summer, and we're hopefully releasing an album in late summer. So lots of really exciting things coming up.
Yeah, that is exciting. I saw the Floyd Fest stuff, and I work with Brian Swank, who works on that team up there with Floyd Fest. Cool. And yeah, he's a great guy, and they're all great people. I know I don't personally know Chris well, but I know that they're all good people up there, and I know that that's an amazing festival to be a part of, both from a performer standpoint or just from a fan going, concert going perspective. It's amazing up there. So
yeah.
So you said Wilmington is maybe kind of a temporary move, or is that where most of your band's located?
Yeah, for now, okay. 2 members, three including myself, will be there, and then one's in Chapel Hill, Durham, and one's in Roanoke, Virginia. So we're kind of all over the place, like we always have been. It's nothing new. But yeah, so.
Cool. Well, look forward to all the upcoming stuff. I can't wait to hear the new music and new album later this year. And everybody go check out Rebekah on all the social platforms, but also sign up for that Patreon. It's only a few bucks a month to support, so well, thank you so much, Rebekah, for being here and taking the time to do this. I really am grateful for this, and I'm sure listeners will be grateful to hear your story and for you sharing and being so vulnerable today. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Listeners, thank you all for being here. Tune in next Friday for another episode of the Dharma Digs podcast, and until then, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.